Welcome, everyone, to the SnapRefund Podcast. My name is Taylor,
And I'm Cody Eddings.
and we are back with a wonderful episode of the SnapRefund Podcast. Today, we're sitting down with Bill Harris, a visionary leader in the InsurTech ecosystem and co-architect of ITC Vegas, the premier global gathering for innovation in insurance. Bill is also the co-founder and chief customer officer of ITC Vegas. And he brings a unique vantage point at the intersection of technology, customer experience, and industry ecosystem building. Today, we're going to explore how events like ITC Vegas shape the broader InsurTech landscape and drill into the practical lessons for founders, insurers, and tech providers alike. Bill, thank you so much for joining us. Can you just tell us a little bit about how did it all begin with ITC Vegas?
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. Great to see both of you guys. Great to see you all in the flesh a couple of weeks ago at ITC. ITC Vegas, yeah, I wish I could take credit for the idea. I wasn't there for the ideation stage. I was running a fintech startup at the time. It was a little bit older than the startup. We were in our 11th or 12th year or so by then. And I got a call relatively out of the blue from my friend Jay Weintraub. Jay had worked for me. I'd given Jay his first job out of college way back when at advertising.com. He was one of my media buyers. I ran media buying for that startup, which became very big. If you've ever seen a pop up ad, I'm the blame, basically. And so I used to ride Jay. Jay was a terrible salesperson, right? Low in terms of his number of calls that he would have every day and performance and what have you. Just, very low, but always got very interesting insights. His calls would always run super long, and I was very much like, hey, we have a specific goal. I need you to do this. So he was terrible at that, but he got into the events business and started an event for digital marketers. So Jay calls me up and he says, hey, I'm starting a new event. It's in fintech kind of, and I know you're a fintech guy. It's actually in InsurTech. Have you ever heard of InsurTech? And I said, yeah, I've heard of it. I keep up on fintech or what have you. My company was doing payments way back when for big retailers like CVS and Kroger and Safeway. So I was like, yeah, I've kind of heard of it a little bit. He's like, this guy Caribou, he's an investor. Caribou wants to do kind of like an event that's very niche in InsurTech because that's where he's starting to see some really good investment opportunities with insurance being really digitized and, somewhat disrupted. Although, we didn't really use those terms back in the day, but a lot of things are happening, a lot of evolution's happening. This guy Caribou has this idea. And I told Jay, I was like, I know a guy named Caribou. It's a very long story, but Caribou was a couple years ahead of me in college. My buddy from my hometown lived in the same dorm and would say, like, oh, there's this guy named Caribou, his brother's Antelope. So it's this really strange, like, just karma where Jay was talking about starting an event with this guy Caribou, who I had heard of in insurance. And Jay was like, I know you used to work in insurance. And I said, I had an internship in insurance, really wasn't working in it. And he's like, that's okay. You have enough street cred, but more importantly, you have those characteristics, to help us build out this event. You're an athlete, you can fill multiple roles, and we're a really small team. Athlete in the sense of like I could stretch, and do multiple things. My golf game, not that kind of prowess, right? Or my basketball skills, right? But Jay wanted to just assemble a real team of ballers essentially to get this event off the ground. And that was ITC. It was so crazy because I told my wife, I was like, I got this call from Jay. You remember Jay? And she was like, yeah, Jay's doing really well and what have you. And I told her about the whole, Caribou thing and the angle of just how just random it was. And she was really the one who said, that is going to be an epic opportunity. That's something you should take, a leap of faith on and jump into. So that's the start of ITC, essentially. Caribou had the idea. He met up with Jay, who knew how to operationalize it from a events perspective. Jay brought in me, a couple other people, and the rest is history.
As they say. So at that time, what kind of gaps were you trying to fill in the industry with ITC as a conference?
Yeah, so really nothing like ITC existed in the industry, um, we were really obviously trying to focus on the growth and innovation that was coming out of all these startups, all these startup insurtechs, right? So we called it InsurTech Connect, and that was Caribou's genius again. He really wanted to make sure it was about connecting, right? And we called it the three-legged stool. It was connecting the startups with the venture capitalists like Caribou, with the incumbents, right? The carriers, the reinsurers, and we knew that that was our key, holy trinity, so to speak, because the incumbents were looking, okay, what is this technology? Who are these innovators who are supposedly going to disrupt my business? Consultants and other prognosticators were like, agents will be disintermediated. We won't need a lot of the core insurance functions that we see because all these startups are going to figure it all out and everyone's just going to pull up their phone and boom, it will be, buying insurance on your phone. We thought otherwise, uh, as to how that would play out, but we wanted to make sure the incumbents knew what the startups were doing and vice versa, and could facilitate those conversations about pilots and collaboratively innovating together. And then obviously the venture capitalists, they had the connection to the incumbents as LPs. A lot of the incumbents also had their own CVC arms going on, so they were putting money in. And we want to connect the money, the capital, to the startups as well. So it's a nice little circle. So we figured if we build this and have relatively equal representation with these three key communities and can connect them, right, we will be successful. And so that first year, connecting people was about setting up our famous one-to-one meetings and having an app that delivered a whole lot of one-to-one meetings, because from Caribou's perspective, the person who came up with the idea, he was very like, I'm going to be nakedly plain. I want to make sure that I get deal flow out of it as a venture capitalist. I want to meet as many startups as possible, but I won't be selfish. I'll build this for the ecosystem because what's about to happen in insurance is going to be transformative. So let's build something that benefits everybody. He was like, I want to benefit, the most first and foremost, but let's build something that benefits everybody. It was a genius idea.
It really is an incredible story, Bill. When you look back now, and actually, I want to take a step back because as you explain it, it sounds like it's so easy. But what you guys have built has been astronomical. Not too many people can build what you guys have built. So I just want to start there because ITC Vegas is huge. What do you think it is as you look back that made all the difference into ITC Vegas becoming the global sensation that it is? Because it's not just national anymore. This thing is really international.
Sure. Yeah. And we've branched out. ITC is now ITC Vegas. It's ITC Europe, which was the old DIA that we bought. It's ITC London. It's ITC Asia. It's ITC Japan. We've had ITC LATAM as a standalone show we brought back into the Vegas event. There's more certainly coming, but that's just in the last really 5 years, basically since the pandemic. We've had all that growth globally. Yeah, it was hard. What I would say was key to our growth was frankly that first year, essentially, everyone talked to either me, Jay, or Caribou. That's how we seeded that marketplace, essentially. I was mainly building the commercial side and a lot of the audience, and Jay Caribou obviously was doing like the venture capital investor side and a lot of the carriers. And Jay talked to everybody in between, a lot of the brokers and distributors and what have you, but also a lot of carriers. But we just talked to a lot of people. I sent out literally tens of thousands of emails in that, and it wasn't even the first year, it was the first 6 months. I started basically April 1st, and that first show was in late September, which with hindsight is insanity. Now that I know what I do and I know how to do it, I literally spend 362 days a year planning for the next event. That's all I do all year, right? as along with like global expansion. But the key was just we touched every person. And from an event perspective, it was a personalized, I'm reaching out to you. I think you would be great either on stage or in our audience or as a speaker or as an exhibitor or as a sponsor or what have you. It was a personal ask essentially to everyone. And I think that really is what continues to differentiate us. People know us, even though Jay and Caribou have kind of moved on from the business and I've stayed, but people know the ITC team. They know we're a phone call away or an email away or a video chat away, and they appreciate that.
It's really fun also when you think about it in the way that it kind of parallels a startup. You have something that's attracting startups, attracting incumbents, and a lot of the same tactics that make the attendees successful are some of the same tactics it seems like you all were able to employ to grow things from the ground up. Major
Yeah,
kudos there.
no,
Now,
absolutely.
as your role as chief customer officer, I'm curious how that definition of customer experience has grown, if it's grown at all, or changed across the ecosystem as a whole. And as we look at the insurance sector now, do you think CX has become a differentiator or a competitive edge for some of the participants in the market?
I think it's becoming more and more of a competitive edge. Everyone talks about CX. There are some companies I think that do it exceptionally well. There are too many to name, but for example, like I think USAA does a really good job. I'm not a USAA member. I'm a State Farm member. I get great service from State Farm also, but I think USAA has distinguished their brand, for example, as an insurance company on their service and on their loyalty and what have you. So I think, it's becoming table stakes from an actual, delivery perspective versus a marketing perspective where everyone says, oh, we get great customer service. Yeah, I've been in startup mode for many years. Most of my career has been tied to startups. And so my vision of customer experience is very much startup driven. The customer's always right. If they're wrong, I need to explain to them what's different per se. But I go with that. Customer's always right. White glove service from Isidore Sharp of the Four Seasons Hotel. If you've never read that book, strongly, strongly recommend Isidore Sharp and the Four Seasons. Jesse Cole, who was our keynote speaker this year from the Savannah Bananas and Banana Ball, talked about, don't worry. And this is something I say to my team, don't worry about what your competitors are doing, right? Worry about what your customers are doing. Focus on what your customer tells you, what your customer's actions are, right? And use that as your defining vision, as your goalpost, right? Don't worry as much about your competitors. Like our competitors, hey, they steal all our good ideas brazenly, right? And try to shop it off and pass it off as their own. Great. Like imitation's the greatest form of flattery. We know that we are, the originators, the innovators, and others are essentially the copycats. So we're always trying to innovate. And back to your question about customer experience, like customer experience is a department of ours. We measure and look at our customer support. We handle, again, tens of thousands of emails every year, either from the sponsor side, tens of thousands of emails, or from the attendee side, tens of thousands of emails on both sides, right? And we respond in less than 4 hours on average, right? That's amazing. It's absolutely amazing for that volume. It's crazy. So yeah, we're always trying to get better. We don't rest on our laurels, but customer experience is now, with millennials and younger cats like you guys, it's it's almost it's up there with price and quality. Essentially customer experience is now, it's everything, frankly.
Yeah, well, it seems that to me, the customer experience that you guys have built has become currency, right? And within that currency, it seems that you guys have really grown your community. That's the one thing that I can definitely say about ITC. It's a community, and it's everybody in the ecosystem coming together in this trusted community. So, what are some of that early insight that you learned from building this community that really still guides you today in the innovation that you guys are doing for tomorrow?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of the early insights were, yeah, they're kind of platitudes, but it's like focus on what you do best, right? And so for us, focusing on what we do best was having the best speakers out there present on our stage. We're always trying to have, from the very first year, we had Brian Dupereau, he was transitioning from like CEO of AIG to he was CEO of like Hamilton Insurance, if I'm not mistaken, that first year. But we wanted to have, you know, the best of the best on our stage. And we continue that. We frequently have to tell very brilliant people, no, you can't be on our stage or what have you, because frankly, we have so many CEOs that want to be on our stage, even with our stage now having 500 plus people and running 12 stages simultaneously. But do what you do best, which was, having the best speakers, having the best content, right? Number two, we had to have really an exceptional exhibit hall, right? We didn't want it to be a trade fair like they say in the UK or whatever. We just walk in. You ever go into an event, you're just like, they're just rows of booths and it's all the same. It's just row after row. And you're just like, what gives? Like, what's exciting about this? So we wanted to have an expo hall experience, an expo floor that was unlike any other. And that's why you see, we've got puppy parks and beer gardens and golf simulators and miniature golf and all kinds of stuff happening. A lot of meetings, stages, the one-to-one exhibit zone was, really at the center of the exhibit hall. And the most valuable space that we had, we made it like non-commercial space to just connect people. So it's those kinds of things that were key to us early. And lastly, I would say, well, second to last, the people, which is kind of the previous two answers. Also, the speakers, the exhibitors, the people are a product. The fact that you're going to meet the best of the best, the innovators, the venture capitalists, the practitioners, whatever they are, they're going to be there. So the people have got to be absolutely amazing. And then last but not least, you got to give people a little something extra. We used to call it in my family land yap. My family's from New Orleans. It's a Creole French term, right? A little something extra, a little something unexpected, you know? And so for ITC, what that very early morphed into was the closing concert, right? Saw both you guys at the closing concert. We started off in 2018 with Salt and Peppa. Then we had Billy Idol. We had Ludacris with special guest star Coolio, which is a great show. We've had UB40, Earth, Wind, and Fire, Boys to Men, and then the Goo Goo Dolls this year. I mean, like great concerts, super intimate concerts where you can almost touch the performer. Like, you don't get it. That's amazing. And demand we have for that. Everyone wants to bring like a plus one to the concert. It's crazy. You guys saw it. It was nuts. So just a little something extra, a little land yap, a little extra value is key to our experience also.
Yeah, they're fun concerts, no doubt. The first year I ever went was actually the year that Luda was there, and that was the only concert out of all the ITs I've been to since then that I didn't actually go to because my flight was leaving. And looking back, I regret that because that's probably my favorite artist that ITC's had out of everyone so far.
It
So
was lit. It was
I'm hoping
crazy.
next year it's gonna be maybe we can get like a Drake or a Kendrick or something. That'd be dope.
It's got to be affordable, guys. Got to be affordable. I'm open
Oh,
to ideas. We're talking about like late '80s, early '90s superstars are 30 years past their prime, essentially, who are still rocking out and affordable.
well, I think ITC's got the budget.
Yeah, yeah.
So
We're working on it.
you all have definitely done great to put on some awesome shows, truthfully. Now, at this point, you're almost in a position that I see a lot of investors in, where you see so many startups and companies go through pitching and either gaining traction, shuttering their doors. So, the same thing I like to talk to a lot of VCs about, I think actually I can ask you, Bill, what have you seen as a separator between the companies that actually gain traction from the ones who fade in this space?
Yeah, that is a great question. I would say, and again, I'm not an investor, not a big investor, what have you. Um, I think what really separates, the ones that have been successful from the ones who fade is really it's the early adoption. It's like when you're going to succeed, and I've seen this from my own startups. When you're going to succeed, people get that immediately. They get it in your pitch, they get it in your other, collateral. They just know, like when you exude that confidence that this is going to work and this is going to succeed because you have such confidence in your value proposition and what you're delivering, you know, that I think that's it's hard to quantify, but I think that's really the separator, you know. Yeah, there are a lot of good ideas out there, right? But a good idea without the conviction is different, right? It's like faith and acts, right? You got to have that conviction as well because there are a lot of smart people. There are a lot of smart technologists out there. There are a lot of smart insurance practitioners. You know, a lot of smart people, but I think it's that conviction, right? Because you know it, you see it when it comes across in a meeting or what have you, and people will just say like, "Those guys, they got something." Even if they're small, even if they don't have any customers or clients, like everyone starts from ground zero essentially. Some people have the benefit of starting with a client. They kind of say like, "Oh, I've got this client, and I'll launch this idea, launch this startup." But most people just start with a dollar and a dream, a website and a dream, right? So yeah, but some have the conviction that others just lack, and I think it's nakedly obvious, really, to the external world.
Yeah. Well, I think that you guys have really shown just with what you've been able to do, the ecosystem that you can build for the people with convictions, having a marketplace that they can go to find people that they need to meet. I think it's so important, especially when you're in such a niche market like InsurTech, right? It's like, well, where do I meet other people that want to do InsurTech? You're really not going to find them in your neighborhood. It really is a specific thing. And in addition to that, for you guys to be forward thinking, you've seen a lot and you continue to see more things. As our listeners are tuning in, talk to me a little bit about some of the trends you see right now that's shaping the insurance industry that in the next 3 to 5 years really see having the biggest real world impact.
Yeah. See, I was going to jump in and kind of correct you,
Okay.
or jump in and say it's not just about insurtech. It's not just about the marketplace for insurtech, but as your question led, it's about insurance. Like ITC, yeah, we started off mainly focused on the insurtech startups or whatever, but very quickly, with that first show, basically, we were like, this is about insurance. That's why the carriers were always at the top of my trinity, Always. It's about insurance. Insurance is an $8 trillion marketplace, right? Think about it. Everything in the developed world rests and relies on insurance, straight up. So if you want to, do anything, you need insurance to do it, right? So, you know, what do I see coming up in the next few years? I'd be lying if I didn't say AI. Like I joked last year, we should have called the show AITC, right? Because that's all everyone's talking about. I think it's very quickly from 2024 and 2023 and when it started being talked about to 2024 to 2025. It's less about generative AI, chat GPT. Like remember, I think it was like spring of 23 is when chat GPT came out, if I'm not mistaken. Now everyone's like, ooh, okay, like that perplexity, Claude, like people know how to use generative AI tools for the most part to answer questions and queries and what have you. But now people are like, oh, okay, how do I actually like gain and yield positive ROI from generative AI? How do I reduce my costs? Like you see, Amazon, not insurance company, but like Amazon just reduced 14,000 people. I had to call my cousin last Friday. I was like, hey, bro, you going to be okay at Amazon? He was like, yeah, I'll be okay because I'm still a very technical person. But you're going to start seeing companies doing more and more out of generative AI to change how they do business. I mean, yeah, generative AI. Agentic AI was more of the focus this year, where folks are, insurers as well as innovators are trying to figure out how do we actually leverage, you know, processes that we might be outsourcing or paying someone to do right here, onshore. How can we use agentic AI to really yield some, tangible results? So I think AI, particularly generative AI, is going to be still talked about 3 to 5 years. Absolutely. I think cybersecurity is becoming more and more of a top of mind issue, not just for businesses, but individuals as well. Because cyber is just, it's not about when you're going to get hacked. It's not about if you're going to get hacked, rather, it's about when. I was following pretty closely Jaguar Land Rover, right? And it was funny because I was explaining this to Contessa Brewer from CNBC, who was on our main stage, and I was asking her about it as well. And she was, kind of like, I don't know what you're talking about. Jaguar Land Rover was out of commission, I believe, for 35 days in the UK. They're the UK's biggest, most well-known producer of automobiles. 1,000 vehicles a day, probably, $100,000 or so a vehicle. That's like a 3.5 billion with a B, $3.5 billion loss. They did not have cyber insurance at the time. They let their cyber insurance policy lapse. They had a quote out sitting on their desk or sitting in legal review, didn't execute that quote. So Jaguar Land Rover is going to have to eat that. The British government will apparently bail them out for most of it, but at the expense of the British taxpayers, right? So cybersecurity is running up the list, which is why we had a whole day summit on Thursday on cyber at ITC. I think by 2030, so 5 years from now, I really think quantum computing is going to also see massive, massive jumps. People aren't really talking about it. I don't think it's going to be necessarily like, hey, insurance carriers are trying to figure out where can we get a quantum machine and what can we do to, necessarily underwrite policies. I don't think it's going to be used for like rate quote bind, in 2030. But when you couple quantum computing with artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, at least as we know it, is completely permeable, right? That's going to be a massive issue and a massive risk exposure to everybody. And no one really knows what's going to happen with that, So we'll see that. I think blockchain might also make a little bit of a comeback. Blockchain and crypto. And these you and I have talked about crypto and stuff. Like I'm excited about where we see crypto going. We've seen like meanwhile on the life insurance side, a Bitcoin-based life insurer have a lot of success, raise a lot of money. I'm very curious about how that ends up and who else kind of follows in that, on that thread as well. So there's a lot. I don't know how many. That's 3 or 4 answers, very long-winded, but there's still a lot happening. There really is. So it's like looking into a crystal ball trying to predict what's going to happen in 3 to 5 years, but still a lot of change.
Yeah, well, you covered a lot there. There's an interesting note that I want to laser in on, which I think some of our more socially inclined listeners probably ask these questions themselves. You mentioned the British government will or may have plans to bail out Jaguar Land Rover for essentially what was underinsured status. They didn't have the coverage they needed, and perhaps they're too big to fail. What do you say to those people who look at the insurance industry and they see things that happen in this industry and beyond, like the use of AI increasing efficiency and reducing costs, yet they don't see rates coming down, right? They don't see the product becoming any cheaper. And they look at that and say, this insurance carrier or this industry is socializing their losses, being too big to fail and having governments and taxpayers bail them out, but they're privatizing their wins. And where does that go? What would you say to someone who has that kind of takeaway about this industry?
Yeah, no, that's a really. I think it's becoming bigger and bigger concern. You see it, with the Jaguar Land Rover example, you see it with like wildfires and the rate increases that were proposed in California, right? Where it was like a 30, at least you're a California resident, right? It's like a 30% rate increase. And people were screaming bloody murder. So yeah, I think that's something that's way above my pay grade in terms of what's going to happen. Insurance companies are every quarter, like earnings season just happened, right? Like during ITC, and companies are reporting, record multi-billion-dollar quarterly profits, right? Which, hey, good on them. It's insurance is a risk. It's risk management, right? So, all right, great. You made profit this quarter, then you should not, be crying about paying out claims next quarter when the next thing happens. So, yeah, that's more a PR and kind of marketing, I think, issue in the insurance industry to my, personal opinion. Again, never truly worked for an insurance company. My internship at Aetna back in the late 80s or 90s, doesn't really qualify me to be an insurance expert. But it's a PR issue for insurance companies because they can't talk about, record profits and great investments and all this other stuff and then be stingy, for lack of a better term, on the claims side. They can't be spending billions of dollars on AI investments and then claim poverty when, you know, someone's house burns down or someone needs a medical claim or whatever else. It's becoming more of a PR issue because also the thing that gets me about insurance is the amount of money that's being spent on marketing and promotion, right? All the jingles and mascots and that kind of stuff, right? Like, yeah, it's about brand management and brand awareness, but some of the stuff I'm like, really, like I think there's some pencil sharpening that could certainly happen in a few areas of insurance that would save money and ultimately back to customer experience, provide a better customer experience.
Yeah, well, one thing you are a professional at is running ITC Vegas. And so bringing it back to that, for anyone, and just really ITC as a whole, any one of the different branches that you do have, but in particular with ITC Vegas, anybody that's coming for the first time, how can they really prepare to get the most out of those 3 days?
Yeah, good question. I always tell people, first and foremost, talk to other people who have been, right? You have to plan it out. And you have to plan what you're going to do to some degree of specificity, but you also have to plan on just the serendipity that happens because it's such a great reunion or homecoming. And it's usually late fall, like late September, early October. It's really like homecoming season, right? And so you never know who you're going to run into because you are going to run into, if you worked in the industry, people that you used to work with in the industry, right? You're going to run into experts that you've been reading about or hearing about in the industry. You're going to run into some great ideas that maybe you never thought about, right? You're going to run into some awesome technology that you've never seen before in our expo hall, right? So there's so much that you're just going to, get hit with, like almost just like, oh my goodness, like just walking down the street, like, oh, look at that, like your head's going to be on the swivel. And you have to be prepared for that. But you also have to be prepared for when you're just standing at the beer garden or whatever, or at the concert, and you're just like, oh, hey, I'm Bill. Who are you? What do you do? Oh, you work for, like there are these great because there's so many fascinating people who are, really invested stakeholders in this beautiful ecosystem of insurance that, you never know who you're going to run into and how that person can impact you because they could be, you know, a mentor or a potential employer. They could be, a mentee or a potential employee of yours. They could be a board member, advisor. There's so many investor. There's so many ways that, the people that you meet at ITC can impact you personally as well as your business or your idea or your dream that you just have to be ready for. You have to be ready to receive that. because so many people are also very willing to give all that help as well. But you also have to be ready, like there's going to be a lot coming your way to receive. So, yeah, you have to plan it out. You have to talk to people. You have to get some different perspectives because some people say, be very balanced, try a little bit of everything. Some people advise you just do one thing, like just connect with as many people as possible. There are people that come that say, like, I had 75 meetings in those couple days, 2 or 3 days. All I did was do meetings. I didn't go in the expo hall. I didn't go into the content, you know. Whereas some people, of course, I advise, we've got great content. We've got 12 stages, 500 plus speakers of the best. We've got great expo hall. We've got, 500, 600 exhibitors in the expo hall. It's the best out there, and obviously we got the best people. We got, over 9,000 of the best people in the industry. Like, you got to try a little bit of everything. It's Vegas. It's a buffet, sample the whole buffet.
It's a buffet. Well, Bill, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for all your amazing insights, as always. If you could leave our listeners with one message about the future of insurance, about ITC, about anything that might help them, the floor is all yours, my friend.
Oh, wow. Great. Thank you. Yeah, no, the future of insurance, as we say at ITC, is here. ITC is the world's largest gathering of insurance innovation. So anything you're going to want to see and help to shape in this ecosystem is happening at ITC. It's been just literally an honor and the privilege of my lifetime to have, a small contribution to what's happening in insurance, because ultimately insurance, I tell people, is about the people, the places, and the things that we treasure, that we hold dear, right? And there's no greater joy that I get than having, helped companies and people and this entire ecosystem connect and do better things for the global economy and for humanity. So, yeah, it's been great. But yeah, ITC, it's the place to be, really. So we'll see you next year, September 29th to October 1st. Once again, Mandalay Bay, Las Vegas. And if you're interested in finding out more about ITC, vegas.insurtechconnect.com for either our shows or our shows in Asia or in Europe. So there's a lot going on, and we invite you to come join us and be a part of it.
We can absolutely confirm it's the place to be. Thank you so much, Bill, for your time. We really appreciate it and really welcome you back anytime to the Snap Refund Podcast. So
thank you guys, and continued good luck. Keep crushing it, fellas. I've been watching you guys, and your growth has been amazing. So keep it up. Keep it up.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Bill.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Take care.
Go Dodgers.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in to the Snap Refund Podcast, and we will catch you guys later. Peace.